What is up, everybody? What's going on, everybody? Welcome in. Happy Friday. I always leave my name on here. I don't like that. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Hope everybody had a fantastic week. Jordan says, what's up, Addison? Happy Friday. Yam Baggy, happy Friday, you Dynasty degenerates. Welcome in, everybody, to the 1st June Friday afternoon stream. G16 says, yo, what's up, my man? But yeah, it's just, you guys know the drill. Unless you're new here, then it's just an AMA, just whatever it is. Doesn't even have to be Dynasty, it could be whatever. But yeah, fantasy football. We already got a couple questions in here. B Toldy23 says, hey Addison, what's up, man? Dynasty Superflex 12 teams start 14, have the 103. Would you stay and take Jayden Daniels or offer it for the 107 and 108 and take BTJ and Brooks? Your quarterbacks are Watson, Kyler, Carr. Weak at running back, fairly strong at wide receiver. To be honest with you, I would take Jayden Daniels. I'm pretty high on Jayden Daniels. I think that I have him in a tier of his own at the 1.03. I have Caleb and Marvin Harrison as my 101, 102 in a tier of their own. Caleb's in a tier of his own at 1.03. And then from Neighbors down to Odunze and Bowers, including the quarterbacks, May and McCarthy are a tier as well, too. So, and I think you kind of do have a need at quarterback. Like you have 3 starters. But how good is Deshaun Watson still going to be? Derek Carr is just kind of meh. I would personally take Jayden Daniels, and then I would try to see, especially, when you start 14 people, I feel like just having the 2 solid quarterbacks to kind of lock down your roster are going to be a little bit more important. And then maybe you could flip Derek Carr for something. You can flip Deshaun Watson for something as well, too. I like the idea of BTJ and Brooks at the 107, 108, but I prefer Jayden Daniels, and I prefer just to lock down the quarterback position instead of going for the other 2. But I do like the idea, though. I'm not against it. I just prefer Jayden Daniels. Yam Baggy, how do you push with this team? Top end wide receiver, tight end. You've tried top tier running backs, but they're overvalued. Or should you wait? So this is a team in a 12-by-11, 1 quarterback, non-tight end premium. You have Patrick Mahomes as your starting quarterback. Gibbs and Javonte. That's great. Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, Drake London, T. Higgins, Hollywood. Njoku is your tight end. No 2025 picks. This team's looked pretty solid. But you have, so your 11 starters are going to be Mahomes. Then you got Gibbs, Javonte, probably. Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, London, T. Higgins, and Njoku's your tight ends. You're missing 3 other guys, which would probably be Hollywood, Myers, and Spears. So that would be your 11 essentially. Personally, I think that's a pretty good, and it's a contending roster for sure. I mean, you have a top 5 quarterback, you have a top 3 running back, hopefully what I hope for Javonte to be a top 15 running back. Amon-Ra and AJ Brown will probably be top 5 wide receivers each. Hopefully Drake London takes off this year. T. Higgins returns to the form. Hollywood does well, and you kind of have that nice stack with him at the back end of your roster or your starting lineup, so that works. I don't really know what else there is to do, especially because you don't have any 2025 picks. So I don't really know what else there is. This seems like a really contending roster already. So I'd probably just chill and wait, see where you are once you get to September and October. And then if you got to dip into the 26s to kind of continue to make a push, then I would do that. But I probably wouldn't be trying to use the 2026 first. I'd be trying to see what player can I get for a 26 second, 26 third. Can I package Tyjae Spears with a 26 second and move into an every week starter? Or maybe Tyjae Spears is really good, so then you package Hollywood with a 26 second. Like those are the kind of moves that I'd be looking for in season. Wouldn't really be trying to do anything right now because I do think that you have a very good and very contending roster with some phenomenal top end talent. It's just how can you fill out the back end? And I wouldn't really do that until we get in season, especially because you don't have any 25 picks either. Joe, what's going on, my man? Glad to have you in here. G16, can you talk about how to navigate the mid to late second into the third in redraft, specifically sleeper ADP? It's a mess in that area. Oh, a redraft question, huh? So I don't know if I've done it. Here, let's pull up a sleeper mock. Let's do it. We'll just start one. All right. So looking at sleeper ADP, I got to change it to. There we go. Oh, no, not rookies only. All players. So the mid to late second into the third round of redraft. So in that, I already know what ADP you're talking about. Like I already know like the players that you're talking about. Because I think I saw somebody on Twitter posted like this range. So the range that we're looking at is essentially you're getting into Achane, Josh Jacobs, ETN, Derrick Henry are kind of like the running backs that you're looking at. You've got Ayuk, Diggs, Nico, Mike Evans, DJ Moore, Debo Samuel, Malik Neighbors, Michael Pittman. These are kind of that goes well into the third round for your wide receivers. Josh Allen is in there at quarterback. Laporta and Kelsey are in there for tight ends. So that's kind of the range that you're looking at for everybody else out there wondering. So if you're picking at the mid to late second, I'm assuming that you're probably leaving the first round with a top tier wide receiver because that's basically who all of these that's basically what the ADP. If you're not getting Christian McCaffrey, you're most likely getting one of these top 5 wide receivers. Maybe Bijan sneaks into there, maybe Brees Hall sneaks into there, but they're more into the back end of the first to where you're not really in the mid to late second. So let's assume that you just leave the first round with Tyreek Hill. All right, you're picking at the very early, so you leave with Tyreek Hill. I like this mid to late second round area where you're able to kind of sneak away. Like I'm a huge fan of Josh Jacobs. I'm a huge fan of Travis Etienne. Those two guys would probably be my pick to kind of lock down a hero RB strategy, especially since you already locked down, Tyreek Hill or any of the top 5 guys at the wide receiver position. So being able to come back with a Jacobs or Diggs there would be great. I also really like Nico Collins in that range if you wanted to double dip at the wide receiver position. Or if you're able to take Tyreek, then you get Josh Jacobs, then you take Nico at the beginning of the third. That would be great. Derrick Henry is in there too. Love him for redraft. Those are kind of like the highlights that I would be looking at. I'm not really looking at tight end there. The tight end position just seems really, really deep this year. Like when you can go down, you can get Trey McBride in like the 4th round. That's kind of crazy to me. You can get Mark Andrews in the 4th round, Dalton Kincaid at the 4-5 turn, Kyle Pitts even in the 5th round. Like there's tight end value to be had a couple rounds later that I'd be looking to stack some of these elite players at the running back or the wide receiver position, especially if you lock down a top 5 wide receiver, then you can kind of come back and see what you're looking at. If you prefer to go running back, prefer to go wide receiver, or one of each to kind of balance your team out. Jacobs, ETN, Nico, Henry. If you get Brandon Ayuk, then that would be great too. But those are kind of the guys that I'd be looking at there at that turn. Captain Kirk 89 have picks 8, 9, 10 in your Superflex league right now. You can pick Brooks, Bowers, and then either Worthy or BTJ. Who would you take at 10? To me, I would take Brian Thomas Jr. I have BTJ and Jonathan Brooks a tier above Xavier Worthy right now, up basically with Brock Bowers. So 8, 9, 10 would be Bowers, Brooks, and BTJ for me. I'm just that much higher on BTJ than Worthy. I was that much higher on BTJ before the NFL draft. Brian Thomas Jr. then got drafted higher in the first round to what I perceive to be just as good, if not honestly, a better situation in Jacksonville for his skill set than for Worthy's skill set. So I would be going with Brian Thomas Jr. I think that he is set to explode in this Jacksonville offense as basically the Calvin Ridley replacement, but he might be better than Ridley at this point in both of their careers. And the coaches have even talked about how, he really has field and sideline awareness. That was something that if you watch, there's a 2-minute video on Trevor Lawrence near missed touchdowns from last year, and a large majority of them were Calvin Ridley. And another handful of them were Zay Jones too, both coincidentally not on the team anymore. Massive target share available for BTJ to kind of soak that in and be a deep threat, just like Worthy, but also be a little bit more in the kind of intermediate range too, as Kirk and Ingram kind of operate the same range. So I think BTJ can be the 1A in this offense easily. And that's why I'm much higher on BTJ than I am Worthy. Here for the memes with the $20 super chat, my man. Thank you so much. Geez, you just come in here every single week and show the love, show the support. So I appreciate that, my man. Thank you so much. Need some advice. Dynasty 10-team super flex, start 3 wide receiver plus 2 flex, tight end premium. Starters are Lamar, Brees, Kyron, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra, Garrett, Hawk, Purdy, Swift, Najee. Fantastic. No first or second round draft picks. Do I try and flip for picks or hold? Your draft is today. Awesome. Holy moly. So I'm not really like, your team is so good. Obviously, you know that. You're flexing it as well too. I know you're not going to trade away Brees Hall and Garrett Wilson. And I wouldn't even suggest that you do that. The only players that I think that you could try to dangle out in front of people for rookie picks are Kyron Williams, DeAndre Swift, and Najee Harris are kind of like 3 guys that have weird / fluctuating values right now, that if you could kind of stabilize them with better rookies, that might be an interesting thing to do. Like if you can flip Kyron for Jonathan Brooks, I'd probably try to do that. If you can flip DeAndre Swift for Trey Benson, and maybe you get something else on top of that, or do the same thing with Najee. Flip Najee for Trey Benson, and maybe you get a little something on extra on top to do that too. Those would kind of be the moves that I'd be looking to make with this roster. I'm not looking to like flip AJ Brown for a couple first round picks and then get question marks on rookies. Same with Amon-Ra. Same with Hawkinson. Really, Hawk is really a guy that if you wanted to flip for a different veteran to help you compete, I think that would be something that you could do. Try to go from Hawk to Mark Andrews or to Kyle Pitts. Somebody that I think is going to help you produce now, because I think Hawk is going to miss half the year. So that's kind of like a side thing, not really trying to flip Hawk for rookies, but Hawk for a different tight end that's going to play the entire year. But really, yeah, if you can flip Swift and Najee, I think for maybe another wide receiver in kind of that range, I mean, you might get BTJ for Swift. It's possible. I doubt it. But if you could flip either one of those 2 guys and get maybe a rookie on top to do that, like a later round rookie on top to do that, I'd be fine for that. Kyron to Jonathan Brooks, I think, is a great move. But I wouldn't really be looking at any of the other use any of the other players to try and trade for draft picks. I feel like that just adds more risk onto your team, unnecessary risk that you don't need, because your team is probably going to win this year. Congratulations. But yeah, appreciate the $20 super chat, man. Thank you so much. That's massive support, massive love. Since it's an AMA, what are your thoughts on the Leaning Tower of Pisa? It is a structure. I've never been there. My sister has. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it's leaning. I don't understand the architecture on that, but Joe, what advice would you give for starting a new Dynasty League Superflex? Of course, would you recommend tight end premium? Any other deviations from the norm that you would recommend? Great question. I would float out tight end premium. I would do. I probably wouldn't go all the way for 2, but I would do more than 1.5. So 1.75, I think, is a good little meet in the middle, so to speak. That's what Russ has for the Trade Addicts leagues. He's got 11 or 12 of them right now. 11, I think. So I feel like 1.75 is a happy medium, because I don't think 1.5 does enough, but I think 2 is a little too much. If you want some alternative scoring options, I would look at point per first down. I don't know if Sleeper does point for first down. I'm not entirely sure, but I know MFL does. So that probably depends on what platform you use if Sleeper doesn't have it. Again, I'm not sure. But that's a fun one to use that can kind of even out the scoring a little bit, so to speak. Mess around with sack yards for quarterbacks. You lose points every time they get sacked, and that could be based on the number of sack yards that they lose every time. Those are kind of some alternate scoring options that I would toss around. But if you don't like any of those, then that's totally fine. I think a normal super flex 1.75 tight end premium is totally fine. And I would just say to have at least probably 10 starters. Not, I'd say at least 9. 9 is like the super minimum. If you can get to 10 or even 11, I think that would be great. And I think that is just more fun for everybody. And then just have probably like 30-man uh, rosters. Keep the waiver wire a little bit, but that's kind of like my go-to dynasty settings. There's a whole bunch of other like rules and stuff that you can have. I think it would be fun if you're in a league that like allows tanking, as long as everybody knows about it, and as long as that person, well, if that person is intentionally tanking, they're doing it for the long haul. I wouldn't worry about like any of the collusion stuff or vetoing trades, or just make sure that you get good people. That's really the biggest advice, is just make sure that the people are good. Sleeper does do point for first down. Well, there you go. Then I would look at that. So point for first down is fun. If anybody else has any league suggestions that they want to toss out there, just of stuff that you've seen or have even played with that could help Joe out, that'd be fun. Brian, appreciate the content. Addison, 12 teams full PPR super flex. I'm a real contender with Njoku and Conklin as my only tight ends. Should I trade Njoku and picks for an upgrade? If so, what would you look at, and what price? Great question. So I am a little bit worried about David Njoku, just because it seemed like his production really took off with Flacco, and it wasn't really there with Watson. Not to say he was bad with Deshaun Watson, but if you can utilize Njoku at an inflated price point based on what he did at the end of the year last year, then I would do that. If you can side grade him over to Evan Ingram or Jake Ferguson, even, that could be interesting. I would, if you're looking to add picks to move up, I'd look at Mark Andrews, I'd look at Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts. Those would be like my 3 main tight ends to look at. If you can add a second round pick to Njoku to any one of those 3, that's a smash. I would totally do that. I don't think I would add a first. If you're adding a first to David Njoku, I think that would bump you up into the Trey McBride tier, depending on where the first is. But I don't think you should have to add a first to Njoku to get to Andrews, Kincaid, or Pitts. You might have to add more than a second. And in fact, you probably will have to add more than a second. But if it's like Njoku and a second, and if you have some other kind of other wider, like a Jahan Dotson wide receiver or something like that, toss them over for Andrews, Kincaid, or Pitts, then that would be the way that I would go. Or if it's a second and a third with Njoku, then I would do that. That's how I would look at it. So probably try and identify those 3 tight ends, which teams that they're on, and then see if you can work something around those. Happy Friday. What do you think of this trade? 12-team Superflex PPR. Give Lad McConkey, get Christian Watson, and a 2025 third. Thinking of moving away from the risk of Lad, but I don't know about Christian Watson. Yeah. So the funny part is that you're moving away from the risk of Lad to the risk of Christian Watson. I personally like the deal. I think that Lad McConkey is severely overrated. If anybody's watched me for any amount of time for the last couple of months, you probably know that. But I've also not been a fan of Christian Watson, though. But I am interested in him as a flyer to see kind of what happens. And I do think that Christian Watson's ceiling is much higher than Lad McConkey's. So I'm willing to do this. It's just kind of, I know he's moving away from the risk of Lad. But if you don't feel great about Christian Watson, then I wouldn't do it. I'm willing to do this, and you're getting a little extra third on top. So it's like a little extra sweetener to do it. But I probably would understand if a lot of other people are like, oh, just give me Lad McConkey as the supposed wide receiver 1 for Justin Herbert in the Chargers offense. Totally understand that too. But I think Christian Watson has a much higher ceiling, and they both have the identical same floor of not really being relevant. So I'm willing to do it if you're in on Christian Watson like that. Here for the memes with another $5 super chat. My man's just throwing out money. Appreciate it so much. Thank you, man. Romeo Dobbs for Javonte Williams. If you want Williams, what else would you add to Romeo to get Javonte? This is so easily Javonte. I would be willing to add like a 25 first to Romeo Dobbs to get Javonte. I view Dobbs as almost a nothing piece, which I probably shouldn't, but I mean, like, what's he really going to give you? Um, as I mean, if Christian Watson is completely healthy and has figured out his hamstring issues, he's going to be over Romeo Dobbs. Reed is going to be over Romeo Dobbs. You've got Musgrave, you got Kraft, you got Dontavian Wicks. I personally think Wicks is more talented than Dobbs. So I just kind of I don't even know what Romeo Dobbs like is. So I would pay a first round pick for Javonte if it's a late 2025 first. And if I have to kick in Romeo Dobbs to do that, then I would do that. I'm not saying no because of Romeo Dobbs. So personally, I'd be willing to go all the way up to a late 2025 first to get this deal done, to get Javonte. And if you can do less than that, that would be great. If you have to have a second, if you have another random-ish valued player to do that, then I would do that. I really do believe in Javonte. It doesn't seem like Justin does, or Justin kind of is like, yeah, but Justin is more. I think Justin's looking at the risk more than I am. I kind of just have thrown that out, and I think that Javante's gonna have a fantastic year. I got a trade offer in the Watcher League with Russ. Jake Browning and Jacoby Myers for Geno Smith. Interesting. A first though, yeah. So that's why I'm willing to pay a first for Javonte, and if that person says, "Hey, toss in Romeo Dobbs to make me say yes," I'm not going to say no. So to me, it's a first. Is what I'm willing to go up to. A late 2025 first. And if it's the same team and you still have your 2025 first, the team that you have Lamar, Brees, Garrett, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra, then you have a late first. So if it's that same team, then I'd be willing to do it. Cameron made a 3-team trade this week. Very exciting. 12 by 11, half PPR, 0.1 point per carry. My end of the deal was you sent Cousins, Evans, and D-Hop, got 225 first, and Xavier Legette. Team was very mid, so going to try a quick rebuild. No, I love this a lot. Getting basically like Cousins for a first, I think makes sense. And then being able to cash out on basically swapping D-Hop to Leggett and then cashing out on Evans and getting a 25 first, which I feel like is also really solid value right now, especially because it's June. I really, really like this. So especially if you identified your team as mid and you got to try and push one way or the other, the easiest way I think is to push backwards to then start trying to building back up. So I love this a lot. I think this is a fantastic deal on your end to get both first and a shot on Leggett, who I'm fairly high on. I would take Leggett over Lad McConkey. So I love this a lot. I think this is a fantastic deal, dude. Well done. What are your feelings on trading for players that you traded away in the past? I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, like, especially I don't really have I don't really like just like in general in a vacuum. If you're in an active enough league, I've been in one Dynasty league now for about 7 or 8 years, and I have moved and reacquired and then moved and then reacquired again multiple different players. Like I feel like I had the entire 2020 running back class multiple times at different points throughout their careers. Like I had Taylor, then I traded him away, and then I had Dobbins, and then I traded him away, then I have him back now. He's on my roster now. I've done the same thing with Aaron Jones. He's been off and on my team for multiple years. Javante's been off and on my team. Thielen is another guy who's been on and off of my team at multiple points. When he was on the Vikings, then he was on the Panthers, and it's just so I don't have an issue like in a vacuum. Don't have an issue whatsoever, and especially I think if you're in an active enough league, it might just happen. And there are times too where you make a trade and the trade feels more like you're just winning it because of the value, right? Like that you are, you're not really like, I don't really want to get rid of this guy, but the value is just too good. And then something happens and then you're able to trade for that player back later in the future. That happens, I think, a decent amount as well too. So, no, I don't know if that answered your question, or maybe I just didn't understand what your question was. But yeah, that's I don't really have an issue with it. So Danny acquired T. Higgins and Rome and a second for DJ Moore and Ayuk. T. Higgins, Rome Odunze, and a second for DJ Moore and Brandon Ayuk. Did you get enough? I don't think you got enough back. Because the way that I would rank these, I would rank them Ayuk, Moore, Rome, T. Higgins. That's my ranking for the 4 guys. And Ayuk is a tier above Moore, Higgins, and Rome for me. So I don't think a second round pick is enough to do that. Because if you want to scratch, I'm fine with scratching off Rome and DJ Moore. There's kind of 2 sides of the same coin on the Bears receivers. If you want more of the production now or kind of the long-term upside for the future with the potential for kind of production. It's kind of like DK Metcalf and JSN. Which one do you prefer? That's DJ Moore and Roma Dunze to me. Just at maybe a little higher of a level. But I don't think I would pay T. Higgins in a second. Like, I don't think I would trade Ayuk for T. Higgins in a second. I think it's an okay deal. I think it's probably like a 60-40 deal, but the 60%'s on the Moore and Ayuk side. Just because I think Ayuk is that much better of a player. But it's close. I don't think it's bad. I just think I'd prefer Moore and Ayuk a little bit more. I could be wrong on that. Steve, how do you value FAAB as a trade asset? X percentage equate to a pick, for example. I treat FAAB as like nothing. Basically, if I'm able to trade any sort of FAAB for any rookie picks, I would do that. Now that's not to say like if you have like $1,000 of FAAB budget, I wouldn't just spend all $1,000 on like a 4th round pick, because you could more than likely gain multiple 4th round picks throughout the season by adding people and then trying to flip them later on, or flip them immediately after you pick them up. So I guess that probably comes into why to the percentage equate. I've never really thought about this, to be honest with you. I've never really thought about what my, like, if I were to just say how much of my budget am I willing to spend for a 4th round pick, I've never really thought about that. Let me drink some water and figure this one out. I would say, I think 25% of your FAAB for a 4th is too low. So maybe it's 50%, because you could swing and miss on a FAAB guy, on a waiver wire guy so easily, that almost taking a shot on a 4th rounder would be a higher probability of hitting on a player. But if you're really good at it, or if your league's not, it also depends on how deep your league is too. Like if your league is a 30-man roster versus 20-man roster, that FAAB is going to be worth a lot more. So that variation comes in as well too. But I think in general, probably about a third of your FAAB is probably worth a 4th round pick, and probably if you double that, so it's about a little over 50%, 2/3 is probably worth roughly a third. Nah, it's probably worth a little bit more. Probably your whole entire FAAB is probably worth a third. Man, that was a tough question. I've never thought on that before. I've literally never thought about what like a percentage of my FAAB would equal to in draft picks. I don't know if anybody else has different answers on that. But it also depends on how much on how deep your rosters are too. So like what are the best assets on the waiver wire? I think that's the biggest variation on that. I'm gonna move on. I'm sorry, Steve. That one kind of hurt my brain. I've literally never thought about that at all. Whiskey Traveler loves no tight end leagues. That would just make some wide receivers. Feels like you only have to care about good players. This one, I'm on board with this one too, especially if you crank up the premium. That's a good one. So that helps you out there, Joe. Cody, win now tight end trade targets. You've got Goddard and Likely, but want to upgrade. Mark Andrews, Kelsey is the perennial win now target. Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson. You could probably look at George Kittle. I think Kittle's really interesting because if Debo or Ayuk get moved, especially if they get moved before the season, then Kittle's target share opens up a lot. So I like that one. Dalton Schultz is not terrible either. They're not really an upgrade on Goddard. But Andrews, Kelsey, Ingram, Kittle, Ferguson would probably be the 5 that I would look at. Ferguson, I think, is completely undervalued considering that he was one of 7 tight ends last year with over 100 targets, and his situation probably got better. So, if you want to look at moving Goddard for Ferguson, I'm all aboard on that one because I think that increases your target share and then increases your weekly consistency and probably your ceiling as well too. Nathan in win now mode with Pollard, Monty, and 4 plus some lower end backups. Good enough, or should I try to do more at the start of the season? You're stacked everywhere else. I think you're good enough for running backs right now. I would probably try to go for some more backups because just having more backups is going to increase the number of opportunities that you have. That when a starter goes down, you have that backup and you have the guy that's going to fill in next. Basically exactly like what you probably did with Jerome Ford last year. I don't know if you traded for him, but if you had Jerome Ford going into the season last year, if you're able to have more backups to increase your probability that you find this year's Jerome Ford, then that just immensely helps out your odds of winning a championship by just finding a guy, just this random, gem hidden in the dirt. You know what I mean? You probably have heard my advice. That's kind of like what you were going on before. I wouldn't do anything now, and then just try to see what goes on at the first few weeks of the year. And then if you got to make a move, if it looks like you really just need that running back, then I would try to spend that second round pick for a Joe Mixon, for maybe an Aaron Jones type player if he looks like he's going to do well in Minnesota. Like a Najee Harris, even send a second for Najee Harris or something like that. That's a move that I would be looking for in season to buy a running back, to see you might not even need a running back at that point. Maybe your handcuffs are just doing enough work for you that as long as Pollard and Monty stay healthy, that you're doing really well. Or B, if you do need a running back, you don't need to do it now, but just wait to see what happens in season and make sure that you are still a contender, which I'd imagine you would be. But yeah, just see what happens in season. Jordan, would you trade Dotson in a second and a third for Mike Evans if you were a contender? Absolutely. Yeah, that one's pretty easy to me. I skipped over B told him. I'm sorry, man. Thoughts on this inbox offer? I get Christian Kirk and a 25 fourth and give up Hollywood and a second. Oh man, the difference to me here is the pick disparity between the second and the fourth. If this was Hollywood and a third for Kirk and a fourth, I would take Christian Kirk, but that second is weighting is tipping the scales just a little bit more to that side. So I would take Hollywood in a second here, mostly because of the second, or the difference between the second and the fourth. But like I said, if you were to switch that up and make that Hollywood in a third for Kirk in a fourth, then I would take Kirk. So maybe try and see if you can just counter with that and see what happens. I do like Christian Kirk more than Hollywood, so I'm on board with that. Just make it a third round pick. And then, yeah, Jordan, I would take Mike Evans here pretty easily. William, one quarterback, half PPR, Brooks or Brian Thomas Jr. at the 1.05. Oh, man. So they're both in a tier for me, and literally the exact same tier at this pick right here. I lean Jonathan Brooks slightly, like 52% Jonathan Brooks to 48% BTJ. But if you have a specific need at one of the positions, this is where I would use team need as a tiebreaker. So William, if you want to drop your running backs and your wide receivers, see what we got, or if you already know that you have a very specific need at one of those positions, then that's probably who I would go with, and use your overall need as a tiebreaker. That's just, I feel so strongly and confidently about both these guys. But so this is kind of making me lean more towards Jonathan Brooks. I do think that Brooks has a better chance of increasing more in value by 2025, by this time next year, than BTJ. Like, I think Brooks has the ability to be a top 5 dynasty running back next year, whereas BTJ, I think, will gain value, but I don't think that he gets into the top 15 just because there's so many other good wide receivers out there right now. So that could be another point in Jonathan Brooks's favor for that one. Polo startup dynasty auction, 12 by 11, 1 PPR, 0.5 tight end premium, best ball, deep at wide receiver, tight end, best quarterbacks are T-Law and Tua, best running backs are Kyron White Swift, focus tier up at quarterback or running back. I'd probably look to tier up at the quarterback position. Because with it being best ball, it's actually really nice to be deep at wide receiver because any of those random wide receivers can just kind of go off. But I'd probably look to see if you could move up at the quarterback position. I'm just always in favor of just trying to get better quarterbacks and lock that position down in a super flex league. So if you could send Tua and something and move up to Dak Prescott or move to Jaden Daniels or Kyler, then those would kind of be the players I would look at. You could do the same with running back. If you can easily move Kyron up to ETN or Jonathan Taylor, or maybe you move Kyron over to Jonathan Brooks, you get something on top, and then you use that extra piece to move your quarterbacks up. You could do that as well too. But other than that, I'd probably be more looking at the quarterback position than the running back position in a best ball league. Because I feel like at running back, you can just kind of you get those handcuffs that do whatever, and they can do well for you. But the quarterback position, I feel like, is much more predictable on a yearly basis. So locking those down to have good quality starters annually in a best ball league, I think is going to be it's the least impactful position, I think, for best ball. Ranked Dynasty 1 quarterback start 9. Bowers, McConkey, Jaden Daniels, Brooks. Is that Jaden Daniels? I imagine it is. Brooks, Benson. I've never seen Jaden Daniels abbreviated as JD5. So 1 quarterback. My rankings go Bowers, Brooks, Jaden Daniels, Benson, McConkey are my. So 1, 4, 3, 5, 4. Bowers, Brooks, Jaden Daniels, Benson, McConkey. That's my ranking. Chris recently made a few moves to turn Tua into Lamar. How would you handle Lamar Jackson as an asset for the coming years? When does it make sense to move on from him and not get stuck with his value drop? Why would his value drop? Like, he's only 27 years old. I don't really know why his value would drop, especially if he continues just being a top 5 quarterback. I love having Lamar Jackson. I think he's one of the underrated top elite quarterbacks, so I'm a huge fan. I don't really know when his value would drop, why it would necessarily drop. I guess as a mobile quarterback, once you hit 30, then you're kind of but that's still 3 years away. So I just use Lamar Jackson for production and then see how you can move him over to somebody else, just like what you did from Tua to Lamar. How can you move from Lamar to Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes? Like, are we worried about Josh Allen is a year older, but we're not worried about a value drop for him? I'm just kind of curious on why we're worried about a value drop for Lamar. I'm not really sure. Oh, William, Bijan, White, Spears, Swift, Wilson, Puka, DK. Yeah, I would go with Brooks. I think your wide receiver position is fantastic. Running backs are great too, especially locked down with Bijan. But yeah, I think I would go for Jonathan Brooks here. I think you have a slightly more need at the running back position, so I'm good with taking Brooks at the 105. Love it. Joe, 1 second. All right, what are your thoughts on IR and taxi squads for a new league? IR, I'm in favor for. I would like to have multiple IR spots, like at least 2, if not more, like 3 or 4, especially if your actual roster is really deep. Basically take like 10% of your um, team roster and just then and have that as like an IR spot. So if you have 25 to 30, that would basically be 2 or 3. I'd probably lean more towards 3. I just like having more IR spots because then that promotes more activity. Because when players get hurt in season, then they're going to move them over to the IR, and then you're going to have players be picked up off of waivers. So I feel like that's just kind of like a very natural way to promote activity, even if it's not really like super impactful activity. It's just kind of like waiver wire moves and roster management. Activity is activity, and whenever you see people making moves and you get emails or notifications or anything like that, it makes you check in on the league and then see what's going on. Taxi squads, I actually like hot take on this one, and I've been like this for years. I'm not a fan of taxi squads. I just really don't get the point of taxi squads. Like, why don't you just add extra drafts or extra roster spots? Like, if you have 25 active roster spots and then 5 taxi squad spots, why not just have 30 roster spots? You know what I mean? Like it's essentially the same. And I don't really get the whole like developmental side of it or anything like that. And then you got to have all the extra rules of when does a player no longer qualify to be on the taxi squad. Um, I don't understand taxi squads, and that could just be me, and everybody else could understand that. But um, I just don't I don't get it. I would rather just have extra roster spots. So that's my opinion on taxi squads, and then try to just have a solid number of IR spots to help people move them over to in season, and then to pick up players off waivers. Twitter says Jahan Dotson is a buy after reception perception profile dropped. Please don't buy Dotson. The funny part about his RP is that we've known since he was at Penn State that he's a fantastic route runner. It just hasn't worked out for 2 years in the NFL, which sucks. I mean, I got his jersey right up here. So Dotson fan. But yeah, I agree with you. Whiskey Traveler says the same thing. Great time to sell Dotson. Smash accept any second. I agree with you. It just it just wasn't there. I saw somebody compare Dotson's first 2 years to Brandon Ayuk's first 2 years in the league, and I'm like, boy, that's a reach. uh, so yeah, I just bleh. Reception perception has no correlation to fantasy success. I do and I don't agree with that. I think RP is a good way of identifying, um, like for example, Justin. One of the biggest reasons why he was in on buying Nico Collins this time last year for like a 3rd round pick was largely because of his reception perception and the upside that he had. That if things were to go well for him, based on who he is as a route runner and his skill set as an X receiver, that could be a major upside swing because of RP. Um, so there is that, but then there's also like, and I think RP like Matt loved Tyler Lockett because of it. Like the first couple of years that Lockett was in the league, his RP was really really good. But I feel like you kind of point out that yeah, like you said, like there are other underlying peripherals that maybe I'm just using RP as like these were like the really good examples of it really working, and I'm kind of like closing my eyes to the denominator and only looking at the numerator of that. But I mean, maybe we'll see with Jahan Dotson. I don't really know, but I do think that RP correlates to fantasy success um, at the very bottom. So if you're not a good route runner at all in RP, you grade out terribly in RP. That probably means that you're not going to be good for the NFL, and then you're not going to be good for fantasy. So I do think in that way that is interesting. But I think at the top, when there's so many other good route runners and stuff, you kind of got to look at more than just RP at that point. So I think it's like everything else, it's a tool, but you got to know how to use the tool. And I do agree. I'm not using that as a reason to buy Jahan Dotson. Finish the startup 12 by 11, 2 tight end premium. Kyler Bijan, AJ Brown-Dell. Ooh. I like this a lot, dude. I like this a lot. I think you could go for a little bit more tight ends, but having Sinnott and Dulcich in there are really solid. I mean, the other positions are fantastic, and you probably use some of the tight end hype to get you, AJ Brown and JT and Bijan and Tank Dell and Rashid Rice and Kenneth Walker. Still came out with Kyler and Will Levis. I like it. Deontay's solid for the back end. Jerome Ford, Wicks, Spears. Yeah, dude, you killed this. That's awesome. Way to go, man. Lots of strong backups show a role with them for the first few weeks. Yep. There you go. Backups for days, man. 12 by 10, one tight end premium for Elixon. God, I feel like you're in this chat every single week. I'm so sorry. I feel like I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Elixon. Anyway, sorry. 12 by 10, one tight end premium. Would you add anything to Rome to go get neighbors? You also have Caleb Williams on your roster. I'd add a 25 second. I wouldn't really do anything more because I mean, if you're looking at it from like a super flex perspective, like what would you move from the 106 to get up to the 104? And if you have like a late 25 second, or if you have Jahan Dotson, I mean, there you go. But yeah, it's really nothing super significant. I wouldn't add an early second round pick, but if you had like a late second or something like that, and you're like, well, if this becomes like the 210, then I'm not going to be worried about it. But yeah, I mean, really nothing significant. I do prefer neighbors over Rome, but I'm not like going all in to try and get neighbors. So I do think that Rome's going to be fantastic. You're just going to have to wait a little bit longer. Any thoughts on Jaylen Tolbert? How did you grade him coming out? Is he worth trying to acquire? Tolbert did not grade well for me. He graded out as the wide receiver 13 in 2022. So yeah. I like taking the shot on him. Like I feel like he's past the point of being like a throw-in. It's like if you were just getting it, like if you're trying to do a deal and the guy doesn't have any third or fourths or anything like that, and you're just like, well, just toss in Jaylen Tolbert. Like I'm fine with that, but I'm not actively going out there and acquiring him because I feel like he's like a worse version of Jahan Dotson. Like we have seen nothing for 2 years. They actively went out and got Brandon Cooks. They've had Michael Gallup now for a couple years, and now that he's gone, Jaylen Tolbert might step into his role, blah, blah, blah. But like we've seen nothing for 2 years to make me care really at all about Jaylen Tolbert and his potential. Again, like if you have like a dart throw swing on a guy that late and he's basically free, then fine. But like I would not actively go out and acquire him. If you're looking for a guy to spend like a third round pick on, I'd go out and acquire Josh Palmer instead of going for like Jaylen Tolbert. So I think he needs to be basically free for me to get him. Love it. Love that people are whiskey travelers just answering all these questions. Love me some Josh Palmer. Yeah. Yep. Can you predict your end of season 24 rookie wide receiver rankings for one starting out this year? So, how they would look at the end of the year? Marvin, Neighbors, Rome, BTJ. Like the top 4 didn't move. I could see a world where I get swayed into BTJ over Rome. I could see a world. I don't think it's a very plausible world, but I could see it. And then so the top 4 basically stay the same, and then the rest of them 5 through 8 are going to depend heavily on if any of them face planted or not. I would probably take a guess that Leggett might still come in at 5, or McConkey comes in at 5. I could see Javon Baker getting up into that area. I could see Jalen Polk getting up into there. Basically, whichever one of those two Patriots receivers actually does well and ends up being more of the one. I could see Franklin bumping up in there as well too for 5. I feel like I have Leggett and Coleman, I feel like are the two guys in that range, this kind of next second tier of receivers after the top 4. They have the biggest range of possibilities. I don't think I'm saying anything new there, but they do, to where I could see them completely phasing out of the NFL in like 2 years. But I could also see that if one of them does well or even both of them do well in their situations, that we feel a lot better about them. I don't know if I would put them up above BTJ and Rome, assuming that they do what they need to do, and I'm hoping that they do. But we feel more confident about these guys to where kind of like the tier grows. So I don't know if I'm so much like predicting what these predicting like my end of year rookie rankings after the season ends, but that's kind of like how I view it, where like the top 4 just feel very, very safe to me. And then after that, it's just massive. Like Leggett and Coleman could be inside the top 5, and we feel very, very confident about them. But they could also be outside the top 10, and we could be talking about them like we're talking about Quentin Johnson right now, or Jahan Dotson. I could see Baker moving up. I could see, Jermaine Burton moving up. I could see Brendan Rice moving up as well too, and maybe he's the guy that kind of comes out of nowhere and is more of the guy to own in the Chargers offense than Ladd or anything like that. Franklin, I think I have huge hopes for Troy Franklin. I could see him moving up. Ricky Pearsall, if they move on from Debo or Ayuk and Pearsall moves up. Did I see what was the puff piece that Purdy throwing to Pearsall looks like the Niners version of Stafford throwing to Puka? Is that what I think I saw a day or two ago? I'll believe it when I see it. Peter overpaid to make a deal, but wanted your thoughts. One quarterback league traded 109 Anthony Richardson and a 26 second for 105 and a 25 second. Have Stroud and Rodgers at quarterback. Really wanted to move up to guarantee getting Brooks. Anthony Richardson trade market was weak. The Anthony Richardson stuff is kind of scary right now, considering that they're saying that he's still hampered from the shoulder injury. He might still be hurt, like all that kind of stuff. Like, it's kind of scary. In a one quarterback league, I'm fine with moving on from Anthony Richardson. You get the 25 second, you would take that over 26 seconds because it's a whole year early. So that's solid. So let's just cross those off for now. So the 109 and Anthony Richardson for the 1.05, I really don't have any issue with, especially if, like you said, you're going up, you're guaranteeing yourself Jonathan Brooks. I love that move so much. You still have Stroud, you still have Rodgers. Remove yourself from the risk of Anthony Richardson. I'm actually a really big fan of this deal. And I don't really know how much you really, quote unquote, like overpaid to get this done. Maybe like in a trade calculator, it says that you overpaid, but I feel like in like real world dynasty trade, and especially if Jonathan Brooks does what I think Jonathan Brooks is going to do, and he gains a boatload of value, you might not have overpaid 5 months from now. You know what I mean? Like now it might look like an overpay, but like in 5 months, it might be a massive underpay. So, I really, really like this, Peter. I like it a lot. Would you build around tight ends in a premium league where tight ends get 2 PPR per catch? I don't know if I would build around them, but I'm totally fine with having 3+ in your starting lineup if that's how you're defining building around tight ends. Because, I mean, they have, especially the top guys, in a 2 PPR tight end premium, it's so insane what they're able to do. If I remember I had Travis Kelce, I think it was like the 2020 or 2021 season. But I mean, he would have like 8 for 100 and a touchdown, and that's like 30 fantasy points. 32 actually, because you get 16 for the receptions, 10 for the 100 yards. That's 26, and then you get 6 for the touchdown. That's 32 points. 8 for 100 and a touchdown was over 30 points for a tight end in that format. It's insane. So, yeah, any chance that you can to get tight ends, especially the elite tight ends in that format, I'm all for starting multiple guys. Honestly, it's probably more likely that you can start even mid-tier tight ends over some of these other mid-tier wide receivers or wide receiver twos, just because if both of them have a 4 for 40 stat line, like if Jake Ferguson has 4 for 40, and if JSN has 4 for 40. You just got 4 more points from Jake Ferguson in your lineup than you did from JSN in your lineup if they both have the same stat line, which is crazy. So yeah, the tight ends are like I would prioritize having multiple top 10 guys. And if you can start 3 or 4 in your lineup, I'm all for it, especially if they're the elite guys. Definitely. Nathan, in a contract league, we made taxi squads worthwhile by making it so taxi player contracts don't toll at the new league year. So this works for me. This makes sense. In a contract league, having the taxi squads and then you have the taxi squad benefit of their contracts not counting, that I can get on board for. I understand that. But in like a normal, just like regular dynasty league, I don't know what the difference is between 25-5 or just 30. You know what I mean? I understand this in contract leagues though, or in if it's contract and salary cap or just contract or just whatever it is. I understand it from this point of view. So I am on board with that. But the contract leagues are a niche part of dynasty, which is already a niche part of fantasy itself. So um, I'm not assuming that the new league that Joe's making is going to be contract. If it is, then I'm on board with taxis. I'm not against it. But in just a normal dynasty league, I don't really understand the taxi squads. Y'all making me worried about Anthony Richardson. I've got him in Mahomes in a super flex and was hoping to ride, but now I got to consider things. I'm not. I'll put it this way. I think it's slightly concerning or fairly concerning that he's at this point right now. At this point in the season or in the year, I don't think this really impacts Anthony Richardson massively for like his whole dynasty value, but I I would use it as a potential reason for you to start seeing what you can pivot off of Anthony Richardson for to a different quarterback. Like if you can easily move Richardson for Kyler Murray. I know I got asked, would I rather have somebody DM me and they asked, would I rather have Richardson or Kyler in a dynasty league? And I said Kyler, and they were like, ooh, that seems kind of spicy. I don't know if that is spicy. It may not be now because of the injury stuff coming out, but like if you can move Anthony Richardson for Kyler Murray, I'd do that. Just 1 for 1, I would do that. If you can move Anthony Richardson over to like add like a second and move over to Lamar, I would do that. Add a second and move over to CJ Stroud. Add a second and move over to Hurts if somebody in your league really doesn't like having Jalen Hurts and wants to cash out on that. I would move down from Anthony Richardson to Dak Prescott or Trevor Lawrence, and maybe you can get a second on top by doing that. Like these are the moves that if you have Anthony Richardson right now in a super flex league, that I would be looking to see how can I pivot off of him and still maintain production and maybe get some additional value on top of it as well, and just remove yourself from the risk of it. Because even there is still more risk with Richardson than just the injury. Like there is the risk that he injures himself again later on. There's the risk that maybe he is just not a super good NFL quarterback and he is just kind of like Justin Fields and he loses his way out of the starting job. Like for fantasy, he could be fantastic, but for the NFL, he could Justin Fields himself and not be a starter in a couple years. But I don't have that same risk with all the other quarterbacks that I just mentioned that you could try to pivot off to. So you could try that. Yeah, like it's not a super big reason to sell him, but it is, and maybe this is still more of my opinion of Anthony Richardson from last year coming in, where I just really like I just he gained a lot of value for really not doing anything last year. Or Richardson could just be really good. That's 100% a thing as well too. But I also think all the other quarterbacks I mentioned are also really good too. And some of those quarterbacks you could probably maintain that same production and get something on top of. So you got to weigh that out. In one quarterback start 8, would you trade the 106 in JSN to move up to the 103? JSN or Brooks, JSN or BTJ, 4 Odunze. No, I don't think I would. Because I'm just too in on BTJ and Brooks, and or Bowers if he's there. I've seen that happen too. Who was it last week that got Bowers at the 108? But no, I don't think I would do this. I would keep the 106 in JSN and draft Brooks or BTJ or Bowers. Most do you give up for Ingram or Jake Ferguson? Competing and have Hawks are going to need to address that. League is much more stingy than most when it comes to trading for tight ends. Have a ton of picks. I would try just see if 1 second can get it done. I'd pay 2 seconds. I wouldn't pay a first for either guy, unless you're telling me that this is a premium that you didn't mention. If there's a premium in here, but assuming it's not a tight end premium, it's just a normal tight end league, I would try a second. Then I would go. Then I would go up to 2 seconds, or a second and a whatever. For Hawk or for Ingram and Ferguson, I'd try it. See what happens. Chris, in a start 10, 3 wide receiver and 2 flex. Should I be content with my wide receivers? Neighbors, JSN, Pickens, JMO, Downs, Wicks, Bateman, more. If you're competing, probably not. This is a really good rebuilding wide receiver room, and I would probably then try to see how can I take those last 4 guys, Downs, Wicks, Bateman, more. How can I capitalize, especially on Bateman's potential? There's talk about Bateman, so hopefully that maybe inflates his value slightly to where he becomes actually movable and not just like a dead asset on your team. But how can you transform those 4 and help you move up at the wide receiver position, or just move them over to 3rd round picks or maybe even 2nd round picks, and then use those picks to then move up at the wide receiver position as well too. So if you're competing, it's not a great core. If you're rebuilding, I think it is a good core. And then I would just see how you can churn out those last 4 guys to upgrade the top 4, so to speak. That's how I'd look at it. I've got depth issues on my squad. What's the lowest ranked quarterback you'd be willing to get in a package? Maybe Anthony Richardson for a quarterback and a rookie. I would move down to Dak. If you can move down to Kyler, I would do that. Dak, Lawrence, Caleb, Daniels. If you go any lower than that, like if you go to like Purdy or Tua, it needs to be a much bigger plus to do that. Depending on what the plus, I could probably be in on it. But I would basically just go down to Dak, Lawrence, or Daniels are probably like your 3 guys that you're looking at to move down and still get like a solid rookie on top and not really lose the production from Richardson. So that's what I would do. 10 team start. Sorry, I need water. Talk so much. I need somebody else to come on here just so I don't have to talk the whole time. Nick, 10 team start, 10 super flex, have a few thirds, rank Wright, Lloyd, Polk, and Roman for you. So my ranking goes Jalen Polk, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd, Roman Wilson. I'm getting so in on Jalen Wright that I love his opportunity in Miami. It might take a hot minute, but I love the opportunity that Jalen Wright has. But Jalen Polk is a 2nd round wide receiver in a fantastic situation to be the wide receiver 1 on the team with a rookie quarterback. So you have to rank Jalen Polk ahead of that. Then I would take Wright, then Lloyd, and then Roman, just because I don't think Roman's that great. He has an opportunity, but I don't think he's a good wide receiver. So Polk, Wright, Lloyd. If you can leave with those 2, that'd be great. I would take Ray Davis over Roman Wilson as well too. So if Ray Davis is still out there, then I would take him over Roman. Jake, in a superflex as a contender, how important do you think it is to have a 3rd starting quarterback if you have 2 top 10 QBs? Would be looking to acquire one now or wait till in season if it's needed? The benefit of having 2 top 10 quarterbacks in Superflex is, yes, I still want a third starting quarterback, but you don't need to be it doesn't need to be an excellent third, like, excellent QB3. Like, you don't need Goff as your QB3. You don't need even really, like, Deshaun Watson as your QB3. You can get away with, like, a cheaper guy. So if you can go out and you can get Daniel Jones right now for massively cheap, then I would do that. Aaron Rodgers has been really, really cheap recently just because of, I think, his age and his injury. So if you can get Rodgers for really cheap, just as more of like a rental, then I would do that. Well, all these guys that are basically rentals, but DJ, Aaron Jones. If you want to take the shot on Will Levis, because he's also pretty cheap as well too, and I'm higher on him. So if you want to take the shot on one of them, I wouldn't go down to like I wouldn't go for like Minshew or O'Connell. I feel like that's too low. But if you can get into kind of like this like QB 25 to QB 30 range of ADP and value right now with Levis, Rogers, Daniel Jones, Derek Carr really wouldn't be terrible either, especially if he's super super cheap. You can maybe get away with Gino or somebody like that, but it like I'm willing to do it now because I feel like once you get into the season, their prices go up because they're starting. Um, you run the risk of actually needing a quarterback. Like if one of your top 10 guys goes down, then a team could say, well, you really need a guy and then kind of tax you for that. So I'm willing to kind of make that move now and just get somebody super cheap that it doesn't need to be like Goff or Cousins or Baker or anybody like that. You can get a cheaper guy. And I do that now. Speaking of Kyler, traded Richardson, Gibbs, a 25 first, and Kelsey for Justin Jefferson, Kyler, and Kenneth Walker. Oh boy. I think this is okay. I take Kyler over Anthony Richardson. I would take Jefferson over Gibbs in a first. And I would take I take Kyler over Richardson. You're taking Gibbs over Walker like easily, but then Jefferson over the 25 first and Kelsey for sure. So that kind of makes up the value. I think this is a pretty fair trade. Uh, if not, honestly, even leaning towards your side on this one too. Like I just mentioned, like Kyler over Richardson, Jefferson over Gibbs, uh, Jefferson over Gibbs and Kelsey, and then Walker over a 25 first. You could finagle this in multiple ways. I actually really like this trade. um, so yeah, this is great. The more I look at it, the more I'm talking myself into it. So there's a lot of big names, and that scares me. But your side, I think, ultimately looks really, really solid for this. Took over a team trying to get out of Anthony Richardson was really hard. Finally got a deal done to get Herbert. I know he will have low points this year, but I don't trust Anthony Richardson. The benefit with Herbert is that you at least have the talent argument on that one. um, so yeah, it depends on what you got back on it, but I don't mind it either. Um, so that could Herbert could be solid. I'm just scared on Herbert as well too. More scared about Herbert than I am Anthony Richardson. 12 team super flex with Burrow and Kyler. Love my quarterback room. But would you consider any tier downs? Always looking for trades. So I don't think I'm gonna have time to have this video out before I'm off for the rest of the month. But I've been trying to work up an alternatives video, a trade down video from Burrow to Jared Goff. And so there's an option for you. So I offered in my one dynasty league, I offered, if anybody knows Brian Haar, he's in a bunch of trade addicts leagues as well too. I offered him Burrow for Goff and Brees Hall. And he said he rejected it, but he said that it was a fair offer, but that he doesn't want to buy Joe Burrow right now because he's worried about the thumb injury and stuff like that. So he told me it was a fair offer. So if you can trade down from Joe Burrow and get Jared Goff, and I feel like they're going to have similar-ish production, especially because Goff's going to be indoors for like the first 14 games of his season this year. And his receivers are amazing. That you just added Breece Hall, who I think is going to be a comfortable top 3 fantasy wide receiver this year. I think that that's worth it, in my opinion, to move down that far. So that's kind of an option. You can move down from Burrow to Trevor Lawrence or Dak. I think would also be something interesting to do. I try to do that in that league with Burrow as well too. The guy who has Dak has T Higgins, so I was trying to see if I could entice him in the Higgins Burrow stack, but I think I swung a little too hard on that one and missed. I think I made him off-putting, but yeah, those other two guys, Lawrence and Dak, I think would be interesting too. Spicy, you like it? See it? It's interesting. Yes, Breece could average more points than Burrow. That's very true. Sack 12-team zero flex PPR start 10. Give London and a mid 25 second to get Tank and Reed. Have Chase, AJ Brown, Kirk, Sutton. I believe too much in Drake London to make this deal. I think it's all right, but I believe too much in Drake London. So I think that's what's swaying me to not do this. And just keep Drake London. You better break your thumb accepting that. Tank Dell is better than Drake London outright. Jaden Reed is not better than Drake London. I will fight that forever. I'd rather have London. Justin Jefferson is overvalued. Genji, what are you doing? What are you doing, my man? London bag holder, dude. Drake London was my wide receiver 1 in that class, so I've been in on Drake London since he came into the league, and he's done nothing to make me go against him. Nathan, Andrews, McBride, and Ferguson on a true contender, looking to move one or sit comfortably. If you look to move one, it would probably be McBride or Andrews, because I don't think you're going to get good enough value for Ferguson. So it would either be Andrews and McBride. I don't think I would trade either one of those guys for like a random 25 first. But if you haven't needed another position that you can move one of those guys for, then I think that would work out well. It feels like so I approve of trying to see what you can get for Andrews or McBride, and just kind of see what happens with maybe you put both of them on the trade block and then somebody offers you for them, or you go out and you identify which teams really need a tight end, and then try to see which players you can get from those teams. Kind of narrow down your player pool for potential trade options. If you do that and then you want to drop those down, we can discuss some of them and see how they compare with Andrews and McBride. Who should I look to receive in return for trading Kyren Williams? 12-team 1 quarterback tight end premium dynasty league, have a surplus of running backs and wants a young quarterback or picks. Could you trade Kyren for? I feel like a decent number of. Quarterbacks would be at your disposal in a 1 quarterback league. Like if you move Kyren for Kyler, I'd be down for that. I don't know if you could do that. Maybe. Jaden Daniels could be somebody. You might be able to get Daniels plus for Kyren, maybe. And those would basically be equivalent to like a first. I'm not against trading Kyren for a 25 first and trying to see if you can do that. That's how I was kind of going for the young quarterback. Caleb. Like if you trade Kyren for like the 108 and Caleb's there, then that could work. I'd still take Dak. I don't know if that qualifies for your for your young quarterback, but I'd take Dak or Lawrence or anybody above that range, like Kyler or add something to him to get Lamar. Those would be the moves that I'd be looking for. If you're looking for a young quarterback, those would be kind of the guys that I would kind of pinpoint. Are you at all interested in the Titans backfield? I still can't get over Tony Pollard, so I've been trying to talk myself into why Tony Pollard is going to lead this backfield. I feel like my argument's pretty solid. Although Nick Holst just came out and talked about how they're both pretty interchangeable between Pollard and Spears. Um, so I am interested in Pollard. I really like Tyjae Spears as well too. I have one dynasty team where I have both those guys, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. I think there's going to be value in this Titans backfield because that offense I think is going to be really solid, and there's been value in Callahan's backfield and in Holtz's backfield as well too for the past 2 years at Jacksonville and in at UNLV. That I think there's going to be value here, and especially if one of the guys gets hurt or something like that. I don't know if this is going to be like a lighter version of Miami where like Achane and Mostert both have value, and because they kind of operate different roles, but also not really. But there's just so much opportunity that it works. That I am interested in the backfield. It's got to be at the right price, and I think Tony Pollard leads the backfield ultimately. 12 team Superflex. I want to trade for London. Sorry, Genji. What would you add for a tier up down to Garrett Wilson or Tank Dell? Well, tearing down from Garrett Wilson, I think would require a first round pick. Nah. I think in my head it would require a first round pick. A late 25 first. Now if you were to move up from Tank Dell to Drake London, I wouldn't pay a first to move up from Dell to London, but if you could pay a second to do that, I would do that. So that kind of shows you the discrepancy between the tiers there with London in the middle. Because I really believe that Garrett Wilson's going to smash this year. So I think it would have to be like a late 25 first or like a 26 first. That might do it. But then from Tank to London, I think I would need a second. Or I would pay a second with Tank to go up and get Drake London. Jefferson in round 1 startup for what? Dude, what are you talking about? It's like you've just completely ignored that Justin Jefferson has been the greatest wide receiver in the league for the past 3 years. It doesn't matter that he doesn't have a quarterback. That's kind of that's going to be my fighting argument this whole entire summer for redraft stuff is that literally Justin Jefferson does not care if he doesn't have a quarterback or not. Hold on, I'm pulling this up. He only averaged 18 fantasy points per game last year without Kirk Cousins. Only 18. He's definitely been better than Cup over the past 3 years. Tyreek is an argument. But it's literally been he's had 1,400 yards, 1,800 yards, and then was on pace for what last year? He had over 1,000 yards in 10 games. His yards per game has climbed every single year. His rookie year, he had 87.5 yards per game. 2021, he had 95. 2022, he had 106. Last year, he averaged 107 yards per game. It's ridiculous. If you're not counting the first game that he came back, he only played 18% of snaps. So the last 4 games of the year, he was on pace for 128 receptions, 2,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns without Kirk Cousins. Justin Jefferson does not care who the quarterback is. On pace for 2,000 yards last year in the final 4 games. I think you just hate Justin Jefferson for literally no reason. This is going on Twitter. There, it's on Twitter. I love it. Polo, Superflex, half 0.5 tight end premium. Tua plus what equals Kyler Murray? X can be Debo, Evans, Reed, Kirk, Njoku, or Adonai. Which would you not include as X and why? Great question. All right. All of them. I would add all of them to go up and get Kyler Murray. Not like all of them as a like I would. There's not a player on this list that I would not have as the X to fill the gap between Tua and Kyler Murray. So I feel like that's a pretty easy answer. Go get Kyler. Carl, 12 team Superflex, 0.5 PPR, 1 PPR for tight ends. Currently in my rookie draft and have the 105. Caleb and Daniels are off the board. Have Dak, Richardson, Bryce, CD, Ayuk, Pittman, Amar, AT, JSN, Watson, and McBride. Set at running back. Do I try to move up for Marv or sit and take Malik, Odunze, May, or McCarthy? Ooh. So the 103 is on the board right now. On the board, on the clock. 1.03 is on the clock. Is that what you're saying, Carl? So that you're asking what can you add to the 105 to move up to get Marv, which I would love to do. Can you can you do Christian Watson? 105 and Christian Watson for Marvin Harrison Jr.? I don't know if I would do T or JSN. I feel like that's just too rich to move up to get Marv. Although I probably would do it. I would try with Christian Watson, see if that gets done. I would go to JSN or Amari and see if either one of those two get done. You know what? Screw. This is what I would do. I would go to the 1.03 manager and I would say, I'm going to give you the 105 and your choice of Amari, Jackson Smith and Jigba, or Christian Watson. You get your choice of one of those three. Let's see what he says. Because I don't think it's beneficial for you to trade anybody better than that. Like I wouldn't trade Pittman in the 105. I wouldn't do Ayuk in the 105 or McBride. I yeah. So I would try one of those three. If he says T Higgins, I might consider it with T Higgins. So it'd basically be like T and May or McCarthy and move up to get Amari. I don't know if I love it, but it could be worth it, especially for a team like yours where you're loaded, he's loaded. So yeah, I'd try it. I'd see what happens. All right. I'll give a final call then, since we've been going for almost 90 minutes now. And Genji's still arguing about Justin Jefferson sucks. All love, dude. All love. See, somebody just said in the comments of my tweet on that Justin Jefferson pace, Sam Darnold is going to take that team to the next level. Let's go. Amaze Hayes _ my dude. There it is on the screen. There's the Twitter. Go tell people why Justin Jefferson sucks for being on pace for 2,000 yards without Kirk Cousins last year. Love you, man. All right. So this seems like a good place to end it unless we get any last minute buzzer beater questions. But I do want to remind y'all that this will be the last Friday that I go live for the next couple of weeks, probably until July. You said he sucks. Just admit it. You said he sucks. But yeah, so this will be the last Friday afternoon that I go live for the next few weeks until July. Because the wife and I are expecting a baby next week. We go in for induction. So next Tuesday. So by this time next week, I might be an actual father. And then I'm going to take a couple weeks off for paternity and stuff. So probably won't be until I'm not going to promise July 5th, but probably won't be until July 12th. We'll see if what happens on July 5th, the day after July 4th. But yeah, so I apologize for not going live for the next few weeks, but I will be busy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the congratulations. Enjoy the start of fatherhood. Thank you, Nathan. BWs, give Keenan Allen a second and 2 seconds for Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill for sure, man. Even if you're rebuilding, you're taking Tyreek Hill and then you're going to flip him for way more. So take Tyreek Hill for sure. It is a boy. Genji, it is a boy. His name is Oliver. So, yep. Oliver will be here next week. Hopefully easy peasy. Everything goes smoothly. It's going to be fun. It'll be good. I'll post pictures on Twitter. So Genji, if you get a Twitter, you can see on there. But yeah, took your advice and offered Downs and Wicks in my league. Got offered Higgins for him. I take that outright, especially since I own Burrow. Yep, I would take T. Higgins for Josh Downs and Dontavian Wicks. Absolutely. For show. Good luck with sleeping. Thank you. How dare you choose taking care of human life over giving fantasy advice? Thank you all. Appreciate you all the love and support for sure. But yeah, my voice is cracking. I've been talking for too long. When will they join their first Dynasty league? Probably not too far in the near future. He'll be trained up well. Ryan, Dynasty Superflex, JSN 209 Marvin Mims for Chris Olave. I think I'd take Olave here. The 209 and Marvin Mims don't do much for me, so I'll take Chris Olave here over JSN. If Marvin Mims and the 209 were anything slightly better, I'd probably go back to JSN. But I'll take Olave here for sure. But all right. This is where we're going to end it then. We've been live for 90 minutes and my voice is cracking. So I appreciate you guys for hanging out with me for the past 90 minutes. Appreciate all the love and support as we enter the fatherhood stage of life. But appreciate you guys so much. Hopefully the rest of your Friday is fantastic. Hopefully you have a fantastic weekend and the rest of June goes well for all of you guys. And I will talk to you again in July. And it'll be good. So appreciate you guys. We'll see y'all.